I really enjoyed going through the N64 games. There were really only two that I really struggled to play. All the other ones were good to great. Just like the PS1 games, the WCW games got a lot worse as the years went on, and the WWF games got much better. They started from two very different spots, but they really kind of mirrored the trajectory of the two companies. Anyway, let's get into the games. This is a terrible port of an awful game. WCW Nitro wasn't good on the PS1, and then when they brought it over and combined it with WCW Thunder, it got somehow even worse. This is almost unplayable. I have no words for how bad this really is, aside from it's pretty much unplayable. Just trying to do anything in this feels like an absolute chore. It's really not fun. It is much worse than the PS1 game, and I think it's even worse than Backstage Assault. So WCW Backstage Assault was a little bit better than WCW Nitro, only because the game is playable. I'm not really sure why anyone would want to go back and play it, but, stranger things have happened, and someone might want to do what I'm doing and review all the wrestling games on retro consoles, and unfortunately you need to play two versions of this. This is worse than the PS1 version. Every match takes place in the backstage area. They're all just hardcore matches. It's pretty goddamn terrible. The graphics are weird. Just the character models are strange. It's just not a very good game. The only thing that saves this from being at the bottom slot is the fact that I enjoyed it more than Nitro. And that's only because I could actually play this one. It's functional, and that's why it's here. So I think WWF Warzone is really great. I might be one of the only people that thinks that, but I actually enjoy this game quite a bit. It's just a really fun game that bridges the gap between the arcade style of wrestling game and then the simulation style that would become more popular and honestly is a little bit better. In many ways, this game resembles a fighting game where you have to go through a little grid or like a tower in order to win the championship. And it's pretty fun. It's nice that you can see a kind of storyline unfold in this where you'll have to go back and have grudge matches with people, or maybe the order of the wrestlers you have to face will change. It's pretty fun. While the game still has issues, it's much better than Nitro and Backstage Assault. I don't like this one as much as Mayhem, but it is still a really fun game. ECW Hardcore Revolution is just a little bit better than WWF Warzone. The two games are very close, they share the same control scheme, the graphics are pretty much the same. The gameplay differs a little bit, but by and large they're pretty much the same. I'm going to have a lot of the same things to say about WWF Attitude as I do with this, because this is just a reskin of WWF Attitude. It has the same kind of tedious career mode that you have to go through. You have the same control scheme. It's a decent game, but there's much better wrestling games out there, so there's really no reason to go back to this one unless you want to play an ECW game on the N64. And if that's the case, this is the only one that you have. So, yeah. When WWF Attitude was released on the PS1, it was one of my favorite wrestling games. The first time I played it on the N64 was when I reviewed it a little while ago. I'm kind of getting sick of playing this engine. The kind of bloom was really coming off the rose at this point. Of the three that use this engine, this is the best out of the bunch. I do like the game. I like the style that they give you. I like the attempt at giving you a career mode and how they try to make it more of a simulation game. I don't really like the execution of it. I think there's a awkwardness to the controls on the N64 version that I didn't really remember seeing on the PS1 version. But yeah, this is probably the best out of the three Acclaim games on the N64. This made a bunch of strides towards, what wrestling games would be, and what, SmackDown and some of the other games would kind of improve upon. This is just another average game. It's slightly better than the other average wrestling games on the system, but not by much. WCW Mayhem was really the last good WCW wrestling game. After this one, things go downhill very fast. This version is pretty good. I like the PS1 version a little bit more, but this one, I guess it's here just based on my nostalgic feelings for the game. I enjoy it. It's kind of different. It's more of an arcade game than a simulation game, but I like the controls, the graphics, and the gameplay. They're all pretty good. It just has a lot of, arcade elements to it, more of an arcade feel, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. This should have been the direction that WCW games went in, and maybe, improved upon. Unfortunately, they only had one more game to go, and that game was Backstage Assault. That one was terrible, and Mayhem really was the last good one. WCW vs. NWO World Tour is great. I played this game after suffering through Nitro and Backstage Assault, and I was just so glad to play something that was, good. I like this one a little more than WCW Mayhem, so yeah, it's getting ranked ahead of it. While the game kind of has dated graphics, and it lacks some of the features that you would find in some of the other wrestling games on this list, it is a very fun game. The controls and the roster are great. It's really easy to learn how to play this one. It's just a lot more accessible to some of the newer players. This is one of the better wrestling games on the N64, and I think it would have been, one of the better PS1 games as well. It's just a really fun game, very easy to learn. The graphics, while they're dated, aren't too bad. It's just a lot of fun, and I really wish I had played this one earlier. WCW/NWO Revenge is a sequel to World Tour. It improves on pretty much everything that World Tour did. The graphics are mostly the same, but the gameplay is a little bit better. The roster's been updated, and the game just has more stuff for you to do in it. This is a spectacular game. The controls are great. It has just a really awesome roster. It's easy to learn. And yeah, I wish this was the direction that all the WCW games went in, but the license was given to other studios, so we got kind of the schlock that we got with those. This was my favorite WCW wrestling game on the console. Out of all the ones that I played so far, none of them really compared to this. It was really great. I wish this had been able to be ported over to the PS1 because it would have been one of my favorite games on that console as well. WrestleMania 2000 was just an awesome game to go back and play. I would have really liked this game back when I was in high school, and it could have been one of my favorite wrestling games if I had played it back then. It's very close to the first SmackDown game, and that's a good thing. It's got great controls, the graphics are very good. I just really liked everything about this. It's a really spectacular game. I think I liked the career mode in this one more than the SmackDown games, so this one's probably better than the first SmackDown, but not as much, not as good as the second one. It's somewhere in between that, but it is still a really great game. This was a huge upgrade over the other WWF games on the N64. I like it way more than Attitude and Warzone. There's just really no comparison with it. It's a really wonderful game. WWF No Mercy is the best wrestling game on the N64. It was so much fun to play this for the first time. I found it a little hard to put down the game, just so I could write a review for it, but yeah, it was really great. This one I would compare to SmackDown 2. It's just an amazing game. I had never played this before I started this little project. WWF No Mercy is one of the best games that I have played for the N64 so far. Everything about it is just wonderful. The career mode in this game is as good, if not better, than SmackDown 2. The graphics are really good. I think they cleaned those up a lot from the previous game. It's just a lot of fun. If WWF No Mercy had been on the PS1, I think it would have been one of my favorite games for the console. I really like that one a lot. I like it as much as SmackDown 2. If the graphics were a little better, I think I would have liked it as much. So this is where I started looking over some of the older reviews for these games. When I got into this project, I really hadn't planned on doing that, and then I just decided, hey, this might be kind of fun. What I would do is I would pick 3 to 4 reviews and look over just what people said about the game back then. And I noticed a few interesting things by doing this. The first was that the reviewers put an emphasis on graphics. At times, this led them to kind of overlook gameplay to a really comical extent in some cases. This was very apparent when I read the reviews for WWF Attitude and kind of compared them to the WWF WrestleMania 2000 reviews, and I was just generally confused by what they were talking about. Yes, the graphics are less blocky in WWF Attitude, but the gameplay is not as good. Just overall, it's not as good. It was very odd to see this. Like, the gameplay is just not on the same level as WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy, or Revenge, or even World Tour. Those games all have better controls and gameplay than WWF Attitude. It was just strange how they ignored like the improvements from those games and focused on just graphical differences. I wasn't looking to bash the magazines or the authors. They probably didn't anticipate some jerk reading their review 25 to 30 years after the fact, but it kind of speaks more to just where video games were at the time and the way a lot of the video game media covers video games. The traditional media had a way that they wanted to cover this stuff. And, it's pretty similar to how social media journalists cover it now. I would have to do more research to kind of compare that, but that would be for a completely different project and not something that I really want to do here. It was also interesting to see just the trajectory of the WWF and WCW games, and just how they're very oddly similar to just the way those two companies would go. The WCW games got progressively worse, WWF games got better, or at least they were better than the WCW games, or at least maintained a status quo of being good. It's just very strange to see how WCW regressed back to being more of an arcade gameplay, and WWF moved in more of a simulation kind of format. It's just very weird to see that sort of thing. And yeah, it's odd when you go back and look at these reviews and you see what people wrote and the way that they wrote, and you just kind of chuckle about how, many things really haven't changed too much. It was a lot of fun to go back and play these games. Some were what I was expecting them to be, and only one I thought was considerably worse than what I was, expecting to be when I was playing it. I thought Backstage Assault would be the worst on this list, but, what Inland Productions did with WCW Nitro was so bad that I couldn't justify moving it above Backstage Assault. There were 4 games that I just hadn't played before, or at least don't remember playing before, and I'm glad that I had a chance to go through those. All 4 of those games are as good as the SmackDown games, and would have been great if they had been ported over to the PS1. I found myself getting pretty burnt out with the Acclaim engine. It's kind of grating a little bit, like it's just wearing me down. yeah, going back and playing Warzone and Attitude, those are two games I remember enjoying when I was a kid. And going through them now, I'm just kind of like, can I get this over with and just capture enough footage so I can, make the video and move on with my life? And I'm starting to feel that way with, ECW Hardcore Revolution, because it's just Attitude with a bad coat of hardcore paint on it. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.